Okay. So, what was your question?
How'd you get interested into this topic in general? What got you started?
Yeah, so I traveled a lot when I was younger, like a lot. I lived in Indonesia for 2 years in fifth and sixth grade when my dad's job moved out there, and the oh, okay, great. They're saying it's working. Okay, so I shared the link with WBS Apparel. You guys should be able to pull that up, and you should be able to hear it from there and see the visual aids that I have. I have a few maps and pictures and stuff to to bring in. Okay, so I started in Indonesia, being traveling in the US. I lived in like three different states in the US when I was younger, and then living in Indonesia in 5th and 6th grade. And the my interest in different cultures, I think, started at around that time, probably a little bit before. I was interested in history in general, but I got really interested in the indigenous people and anthropology. I think actually when I was in the Marine Corps at 22, and I started taking college classes, and I literally just took an anthropology class as an elective, or I'm sorry, not as an elective, as one of like my just standard classes to start undergrad because I was just knocking out credits before I got out of the Marine Corps. And I took an anthropology class and I loved it, and I had no idea what it was before then. Um, and I loved what they talked about. And then I ended up taking more anthropology classes when I was in college and getting my history degree. So I decided to double major in them because I wanted to do both.
Well, that's a great combination to have. And so, is Indonesian region is where the Papua New Guineans live, correct?
Well, so Indonesia is an island country, so it's somewhat like the different islands have different cultures, but it is somewhat homogenous in the sense that like broadly Indonesian people are Austronesian, and there is variance in between that. But the island of New Guinea has two sides to it. So half of it is an independent country called Papua New Guinea. The other half is administered by Indonesia, but still has the same New Guinean people on it, and that's the western half.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So there's more of a respect for their particular lifestyle, even though it's administered for by the Indonesian government.
Um, I don't know how respectful they are. If you look behind me, well, if you're looking at the video I have on YouTube, if you look behind me, there is an Asmat shield here, and the Asmat people are from the Indonesian side of Papua New Guinea, or I'm sorry, of New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is the country, New Guinea is the island. And that is a warrior shield from that place. They were cannibals, ritualistic cannibals for a long time, and that was eventually stopped by the Indonesian government. I'm not sure how well the Indonesian government respects them in their like traditional ways of life. Um, yeah, I don't actually know, but in general, indigenous people that are not administering themselves, I think they're semi-autonomous in Western Papua, which is the state or whatever it is within Indonesia. They're generally, because they live outside of the standards of the rest of the country, they're often not treated very well. So I would make the assumption, because indigenous people broadly in the modern world face a lot of these same issues, that they do have some trouble from the government besides them shutting down cannibalism, which obviously you can't have. I think they shut it down in like the 60s or 70s.
Okay, I see. And I'm looking at, I got the YouTube video up, and I see that there's Austronesians in Madagascar. Is it true they
Yeah.
share this a similar genetic lineage?
Yeah, so this is funny. So actually I'll pull up another map here. So Madagascar, despite being right off of the African coast, was actually settled. I thought it was by Polynesian people, not Austronesian. Polynesian are did split off from Austronesian people, which are the indigenous people of like Japan and the island of Formosa, which is where Taiwan is now. Polynesian people are believed to have split off from them, But even though Madagascar is so far away from Madagascar and Africa is so close, the original people to land in Madagascar actually landed were Polynesians, not Africans, which is
Wow.
very it's I don't know why that happened.
Yeah, I mean they were able to travel incredible distances, so like
Yes. Yes, they I mean, yeah,
understandable
I got
but
the map pulled
incredible.
up
Yeah.
now. Yeah, the I mean, if you look at this has dates on here. So you have 3000 BC. This is Taiwan. If you're looking at it, so they leave Taiwan in 3000 BC and they start spreading out into Indonesia. Oh, so I guess it was just Austronesians, not Polynesians. But the Austronesians, they spread out from Taiwan into the islands of Indonesia and the Malay Peninsula. And then eventually, because they have this seafaring tradition, and there's not really a huge seafaring tradition almost anywhere in Africa, largely I think because it's one large landmass as opposed to like the Philippine Islands. There's these islands everywhere, which it pushes this technological advance in seafaring. Whereas in Africa, if you're looking at the map here, you look at the coast. There's not a lot of large rivers or anything that would create this seafaring tradition, and there's abundant land, so there doesn't seem to be a large reason for them to look for an island out here. They would have to develop a seafaring tradition in order to develop the technology to get that far away, and that just didn't happen. Whereas if you're looking at the map, or if you're aware of how vast the Pacific Ocean is, the Polynesians, the Melanesians, the Micronesians, they were able to spread out over huge distances to find these tiny islands, and I don't think we fully understand how. They were extraordinarily advanced in their understanding of astronomy. We know that just based on them being able to do it, but we don't know all of the specifics of how they did it. But yeah, Madagascar, man.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you have to imagine they had very effective ways to maybe they even had some kind of agriculture, or I guess what's the right term for that, where it's like kind of a controlled form of agriculture that you can have on boats and that sort of thing. I mean,
I
that's
don't
definitely
so I don't know if they brought it with them. So when the Polynesians, there's something called a what's it called? Cam, do you know what it's called? It's like a colonization package essentially. The Paul
Um, we normally use the word horticulture when we talk about limited
Right.
agriculture like that.
Right, but I'm talking about, like, yes, horticulture is what the Polynesians, the Austronesians practiced, but like the package of goods, because they're bringing with them their chickens, their yams, which is their staple food, and their pigs, which is their, like, these are the domesticated plants and animals that they used, and they colonized these islands with those animals and plants. There's a name for that, and it's escaping me.
Yeah, I can't think of what you. I know what you're referring to. It's basically that it's just an idea of how they're bringing the stuff
just
over.
FYI. I
It's
can't
yeah,
hear the second speaker. I can't hear.
You
I don't
can't
think.
hear Cam?
No, I can't hear Cam.
Oh, that's a glitch, man. I can hear him. That's
No.
odd.
Okay.
Cam, you want to leave and join again? See if we can fix it.
yeah.
Usually that works.
All right.
But yeah, like a basket of goods essentially. Like they're bringing with them and this happens anywhere. They're bringing with them to colonize these islands the goods that they use. They're not going to go to an island and just figure out like there what's already there. They bring with them their staple crops. And they're practicing horticulture. This is limited agriculture. Agriculture doesn't really make sense when you're dealing with such small land masses. And they would do a lot of fishing as well, obviously.
Yeah. And seafood's very nutrient dense. Hey Kim, go ahead and try to speak again. See if I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear now.
All
Fantastic.
right. Cool.
Excellent.
Cool.
That's and from what I understand, I was looking at the flow of the travel that the people Austronesians had, and I think it was a little bit easier to make it Madagascar because there was different land masses. Uh, see how that's the Malay Peninsula that's close to Singapore,
Yep.
I believe.
Singapore is on the end of the Malay Peninsula. It's just on the
Right.
very end by the large island of Sumatra, which is part of
Yeah.
Indonesia.
So I could see that them being able to do that as is, but I think it was even easier because there were more islands and different things like that. But
Yeah, so there's not a lot of islands between Madagascar and the Indonesian islands. There's a few of them, but I mean you'll notice there's these vast areas that they traverse. But even between Africa and Madagascar, there's actually a pretty large space. And the reason that the Austronesians and their um, and the people that extended from them, the Melanesians, Polynesians, Micronesians, were able to do this is because they were developing their seafaring tradition um, for getting to all of these different islands. If you don't develop a seafaring tradition, you don't have like a reason. Like in Africa, they did not have a reason because there was no use for it. There's not these different islands to go to, and there's abundant land in all directions besides the coast. You're not going to end up over there because you're not going to develop you don't have the reason to develop the technology to actually move further out.
and
Whereas
it'd be
they
a
did.
lot more difficult as well due to the geographic nature of Africa. To It's like where are they going to? They
Right.
don't have jump off points like you're talking about too.
Right. Exactly. When they leave Taiwan, they go into the Philippines, and then there's thousands of islands in the Philippines. So they're honing this craft. They have a reason to hone this seafaring craft to go farther and farther out. Whereas in Africa, there was no reason for them to start a seafaring tradition. If you look at Africa, a geographical map of Africa, it doesn't have this same geography that would lead to them developing the basics, which would then allow them to develop that technology further, that seafaring culture further.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to expound on the Khoisan people?
Yeah, so that's actually why I have this up here. So this is and feel free to jump in whenever. Cam is a Mississippian archaeologist. He came on my show to talk about the some Mississippian artifacts and their connection to Mesoamerican peoples like the Mayans. But I'm sure he knows a little bit about this as well. But this is an ethnic map of Africa, and what you have in orange and red, these are two different types of Bantu people. The Nilo-Saharans are the Nilotic people, and then the green is the Khoisan people, which is a combination of the Khoi and the San. And the Khoi and the San are they're related people, but they have I forget which one's which, but one of them is they are herders, they're pastoralists, and the other one I think is agriculturalists. And in orange and red, you have the Bantu people, obviously Austronesian people over in Madagascar, and there's also the I want to share this. This is the Bantu migration. So in the past, you had a lot of you had more coverage. You had less coverage. This area, the Yoruba, these people, this is where the Bantu come from, but they expand out from there, and they use their basket of goods, which was technology in the form of plows and agriculture, which they used to create a larger density of population, and they were able to displace these other peoples. So the Bantu expand broadly outward, and Bantu is a there's I think 100 million, if not more, Bantu people today in Africa, as well as their descendants in the United States and the Western Hemisphere broadly.
Okay.
So they're able to displace the Khoisan people, the Khoi and the San people. They had a farther stretch outward, and if you look in the Congo, the middle of Africa, those there are pygmies there that used to that like they still exist. Unfortunately, some of them are still today hunted by Bantu tribespeople. Not all Bantu are doing that, but it's a extreme subsection of Bantu people. I want to make that clear. But they are still being displaced today by the Bantu, and there's years on this map. Okay, it said this migration into South Africa, where the Bantu people, Zulu, the Xhosa, I think I pronounced that right. They live there now, but they had gotten there as recently as 500 AD. This Bantu migration with this ethnicity and this and their languages and their basket of goods and their agricultural technology allows them to displace all of these other people as they spread farther out. And this continued for a long time. They were able to have a larger surplus of food, a larger carrying capacity on the land, to displace these other people groups.
What what kind of crops did they uh, have agriculture?
So it's still today. It's not in the past. It's not all people. Some of them, like in some of the more modern countries like Ghana and Nigeria, they have they're more modern. But I'm actually not sure what specifically they grew. I think rice. Rice was actually domesticated twice. Once by the Yoruba people, the Bantu people, and then once in East Asia and China. So I know rice is part of it. But I don't know. Do you know, Cam?
I think they had squash as well.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah,
I could swear that there was some type of sweet potato that I remember from that time frame.
Yeah, yams.
that makes sense.
Uh,
Yeah.
Very energy dense. Tubers, roots, I think. Yeah.
This is just a wonderful example, as far as I'm concerned, how culture is a tool, and those who master it the best are right get the land.
Yeah, they do. And they displace people with less efficient subsistence strategies. And there's also,
Exactly.
yeah, there's like when two people meet that have different subsistence strategies and they're fighting annihilation wars, they'll displace each other and they will attack each other's subsistence strategies. An example of that would be in New England. There was this war in the 1670s called King Philip's War, and in King Philip's War, the English settlers in New England of the New England Confederation, which was a combination of these colonies at the time in New England. I think the Connecticut colony, I think it had merged at that point. The New Haven and Hartford colony merged, and then the Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth had merged into Massachusetts, I think, at that point, as well as the Rhode Island plantation colony. And Massachusetts includes Maine and New Hampshire at this point as well. They're agriculturalists. Obviously, the English settlers are agriculturalists, while the Native Americans, the Eastern Algonquins in that area, they are horticulturalists as well as hunter gatherers. So they're growing crops. They're growing the Three Sisters, beans, corn, and squash, and they're the the cows, the domestic animals of the English people. There are conflicts between them, which actually was part of the lead up to this King Philip's War in the 1670s, where the English cows are they're scaring off the animals that the Eastern Algonquin people are hunting. They were stepping on their crops, eating them, destroying them, and that's where a lot of this conflict comes from. And when you eventually have this war, you then have the English people at the same time that they're trying to destroy the potential for the subsistence strategy of the Eastern Algonquins, while the Eastern Algonquins are trying to destroy the subsistence strategy of the English settlers. So you had like an example where there was like they shoot a cow full of arrows. I think there was a cow that was killed that had hundreds of arrows shot into it, well past when it was dead. And this is about sending a message of like, we know that this is what you eat. We're fighting this annihilation war on both sides, and we're going to destroy your way of getting food to kill you. And this plays out in different places as these peoples fight over their subsistence strategies and their ways of life. Because often culture is attached to the subsistence strategies, how people make their living and live and make food.
Yeah, we saw the exact same thing with the buffalo and the Plains Indians,
Exactly.
with large amounts of buffalo being killed in mass, like stacks and stacks of pelts
Right.
going up 30, 40 feet during the 1800s, right? Literally, the claim, of course, was that for the purpose of helping the trains, the train issues, right, and buffalo running in the trains. But the reality was breaking the back of the control of the Native Americans in that area.
Yeah. And it had the added benefit of they can sell these pelts. And yes, the buffalo were derailing trains, but the trains are part of the cultural package of the Americans at that point. So they're like, this is a mutually exclusive thing where you can't have both the trains and the buffalo roaming free on the plains. So somebody's got to lose. And the Plains Indians lost, which is tragic, but it's what happened.
I would argue this is also an example of optimization from dual inheritance theory as well, or however you'd like to look at that. When we talk about optimization, we're saying how much energy we're going to put into a given thing to make it work the best for us. And when you look at the idea of hunting buffalo and the amount of energy it would takes to sustain a tribal group versus the aspect of modernization and using trains going across country, moving supplies, whatever else, that kind of stuff. Yeah, the optimization for the more technologically advanced culture wins. Okay, that's
Right.
what it boils down to, and it's just something we see over and over and over again in the evolution of culture. Culture which evolves, we see this play out. This optimization package occurs over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it occurred like the Bantu expansion is the same thing. They're able to, with their new technology, their agricultural technology, they're able to support a higher population. They're able to support a higher surplus of goods and a more efficient use of human capital. And with that, they're able to displace these other people and their subsistence strategies, which either they, through the studying of the haplogroups, we're able to see that there are less male than female. Often, what happens is the men are exterminated and the women are taken as wives, and that's a euphemism. But or everyone is just exterminated, or there's an element of just simply the people at certain points just assimilating into the cultural strategy and the culture of the other people, of the people that is displacing them.
Yeah, we got in the weeds real quick on theory, didn't we?
We sure did.
Yeah, the invention of agriculture, see it all over the world where it's happened, whether it be the Aztecs, whoever else. But it allows calorie surplus, allows for specialization, and then you see a warrior class, you see a priestly class, and if you have a standing army, then you're going to be able to have an incredible advantage in terms of organization against your opposition.
Absolutely, yeah. And what you'll see and the Plains Indians are a great example of this, but also, excuse me, like a people like the Mongols, steppe peoples, is that people on horseback that have this culture where their subsistence strategy is very much attached to their subsistence strategy of herding animals, of herding goats, sheep, whatever it is. I don't actually remember, yaks. They're able to graze. And in those cultures, they're, instead of putting a lot of their people into agriculture, they're able to put a higher percentage of their people into warfare. Like the Mongols, they're able to have a much higher percentage of their people participate, but they're not able to sustain the same levels of population and they're not able to specialize in the same way. When you have like essentially the male population between the ages of 16 and 50, in the case of like the Mongols and the Plains Indians tribes like the Comanche, the Apache, the Lakota, the Dakota, they're able to field a much higher percentage of their population towards warfare at any time. But that's not able to, that in this case was not able to offset the much higher population, even at a much lower percentage of people that are specialized into fighting and combat.
I think we might as well just bring out some names here as we talk about this, like Leslie White and E.O. Wilson and Louis Bigford. Binford is the head of processional archaeology. He's probably the one that helped coin the term. He didn't invent this term, but he helped coin it in the minds of anthropologists everywhere, which is that culture is the exomatic means of environmental adaptation, meaning that whenever the culture becomes the tool that's used, right, for you to adapt to the environment you're in. And if you become better at it than other people, you're the one that gets the prize, basically, is the idea here. He borrowed these ideas from Leslie White and, of course, E.O. Wilson, and these are the founding ideas behind sociobiology.
Yeah. I'll have to take your word for it because I'm not familiar with him in particular, but love it.
And these are also some of the same ideas that was the basis behind Napoleon Chagnon and how Napoleon Chagnon focused his research, right, with the Yamato as well.
Yeah, the Yanomami, which we're also planning on talking today. I've got the picture of the Yanomami pulled up. These are Yanomami tribes people. Oh, that's New Guinea. I thought I pulled up one. Yeah, this is Shagnon here, sitting in a hammock with some Yanomami people. 70s.
Are they distinctly different ethnically than Polynesians?
Oh, these people are from the Amazon.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, deep in the
Oh yeah,
Amazon.
they're yeah, Brazil, Venezuela
Yep.
area.
Yep.
Okay.
Brazil and Venezuela, northern Brazil and southern Venezuela. And those borders mean a lot less deep in the Amazon, where modern culture doesn't really have, well, for most of history, did not have the capabilities to go there.
One thing I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about this tribe in particular, I had notes about was: is there any hypothesis on why they were able to survive the European diseases?
So they didn't is the thing. So okay, so some of this is not entirely it's there's not too much evidence on this right now, but with expanses in using things like ground penetrating radar, lidar, in the Amazon, we're able to see what was there. But I have a thread on this on my profile about the lost civilization in the Amazon. There was a explorer, a Spanish explorer, a conquistador who went down the Amazon River in the 1500s. I forget his name. Cam might know it, but he went through the Amazon and he recorded all of this information about this massive civilization, about thousands of people showing up on the shores. And for a long time, people thought that it was just lies, that it wasn't corroborated by other sources. And what we're finding now, there was a find earlier this year that corroborates this, as there was in the Amazon in Ecuador, there was a city that was found with this ground penetrating radar that seems to house up to 70,000 people in this small area of very straight roads of high sophistication. So yes, there are Yanomami still today, but the idea, although I'm being very clear here that there's a lot of, there still needs to be way more research. It's happening right now, fortunately, with these new technologies we have, because the jungle just grows, right? It grows over all of this. They had to find Chichen Itza on the Mayan, the Yucatan Peninsula, but for a long time, people believed that archaeologists, anthropologists, they believed that the jungle was not able to support this large population that was theorized, that was recorded by this one conquistador in the 1500s. And people didn't go back there for like 100 years. And when they went back, it wasn't there. So the idea then that I believe in, but it's not fully supported yet, is that the Yanomami and other related peoples in the Amazon are actually they're the remnants of this massive civilization that experienced a decimation of their population at like 90%. And you don't recover from that. You don't recover from that at all. So
Yeah.
the idea is that these people, they 500 years ago, they were part of this massive civilization. Their civilization collapses with all these diseases, but they're still able to support a relatively large population in the jungle, in new methods that they must have at some point come up with, if this idea is correct. There's also the existence of terra firma, which I don't want to get too much into, but I think it's widely accepted. And this is not my area of expertise. This is more like plant biology, that terra firma is man-made, and it's this soil, this highly fertile soil, which we don't understand how it was made. We could not make it with modern technology, but it exists, and it massively covers the Amazon. Do you have anything to say on that, Cam?
Yeah, it was Cortez or Orlana or Orlina. Is that how you pronounce his name? Is that so
Or
familiar to you?
Oriana.
Oriana.
Yeah,
Oriana. Yeah.
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that was his
As
name.
far as the soil and airlet is concerned, the only thing I can really add to this is people have talked about these, and I've heard academics talk about this for years. That with the variety of things they found in the Amazon, the variety of plants and the combinations they use for medicines, it's obvious that this stuff and where they're finding it and how it's laid out within the Amazon is not accidental. All right, that there is so much here that looks like it's intentionally laid out, and that it was done by a population somewhere in the past, and now we're seeing the overgrowth of the stuff that's been left over. If that
Right.
makes any sense.
Which happens extraordinarily quickly in a place like the jungle, where it just grows over. Like Chichen Itza grew over in less than a century and then was eventually found. But there's probably a lot more of these cities. We can't say for sure, but I mean, this discovery is from January in the Ecuadorian Amazon of this massive city that supported 70,000 people, and there's probably more in there, but it's hard to get in there. It's hard to do the work, but LiDAR is allowing us to learn a lot today about this.
Are there pyramids in the Amazon?
I actually don't know. I'm not sure. There's, of course,
We
pyramids.
think so.
Go ahead. Yeah, we think
We
so.
think so. We think so, but we're not for certain yet. Most of what have been found so far in the Amazon has been earthwork, pieces of earthwork that's on dotted landscape, and it's like there's like nearly a million up on the landscape there of various different earthwork spots. There's a guy I know who does work on this at a University of Missouri, and they've cataloged it, just the ones they found on LiDAR, well over like 50 to 100,000 of them. All right,
Yeah.
just across the entire, all these massive earthwork mound stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not like they're doing this work. It takes a while, right? Because this area is massive. But everywhere they're going in the Amazon, they're finding this stuff. They're finding it everywhere. So it's like it it, they're you guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah, loud and
Oh,
clear.
okay. Yeah, sorry, I thought I clicked off. Like they're finding this stuff basically everywhere. Everywhere they look in these areas. So, it unless there's something that is like stopping it at a certain point, unless there's something somewhere that just like cuts it off, then we're assuming that we're going to find much more. And this Ecuadorian part of the Amazon is on the edge of the Amazon. So this is what we're finding at the edge. Imagine what is possible when we actually get to the heart of this area, to the heart of this culture.
I'm going to argue that you're absolutely correct about
Imagine
how
what is
diseases
possible
probably
when we're
wiped out
when
most
we
of that
actually get to
culture
the
in that
heart
area, and of
of.
course the overgrowth occurred. I'd like to also add that when I looked at a lot of these things that were done by satellite and LiDAR, or whatever else, the stuff that's there, I'm not going to mention names right now because I don't think he wants his name mentioned yet. His research is not published yet. But I looked at that and I said, these are cosmograms. These are cosmograms on the ground, the same as what you see in that the same place you see at the NASA Alliance. They are laid out almost exactly like that in the way they're laid out. These are not fences. These are not anything like that. These are earthwork mounds that are there in the Amazon, and they have connections between them, and it's obvious they're using these things for purposes for astronomical alignment. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and Cam's research is heavily involved with astronomical alignment and astronomy in general, right?
I'm biased on this, obviously.
Right,
I'm very biased.
right. But you're also very informed. While
I
you're
would
by, yeah,
I would argue that I know a cosmogram when I see one, and I think that this is something that was done for food procurement purposes. That they are keeping track of stars alignments for calendar purposes, and so they know when the game shows up for the certain locations, when to farm, when to plant, and keeping track of the stars by using this type of technology. And calendars are a technology, a cultural technology that most cultures have to have.
Yeah, for for farming, for understanding when the equinoxes are. And Cam knows obviously so much more about this than I do, but you can find him talking about it on my YouTube channel, Illegitimate Scholar, about the Mayan influence into I'm sorry, the Mayan influence into the Mississippi culture, and as well as some cosmographic astronomical stuff with the Pyramid of the Sun and Moon of the Aztecs, which either comes from Mayan culture or from a shared progenitor culture like the Olmecs. I didn't misrepresent that, did I, Cam?
I have not mentioned Olmecs yet in my research, but you got a good vein on it. What you're saying.
Sweet, fantastic. Yeah, the Olmecs, by the way, the Olmecs. I'm just saying that was just an example of a possible progenitor species, or I'm sorry, progenitor culture.
It makes sense that the rainforest could have this massive population due to just it probably has incredible carrying capacity, biodiversity, plants are edible, lots of wildlife to hunt.
Yeah, so you'd think so, but for a long time, the rainforest was understood as a green desert in the sense that like it wasn't providing much, and this was the prevailing theory for a long time. Cam, you might know more about that than I do. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I was looking up a particular drug that is a. It's pretty common when people take nowadays that they go to the Amazon and go have it. It's
Yeah, ayahuasca.
ayahuasca. Thank you. If you know how ayahuasca is prepared, it's like 3 or 4 different medicines that they find within the Amazon itself that they use and they prepare together. And to be able to do this and have the technology to be able to do this, it screams to me that there was at one time they had perfected a lot of these things for over thousands of years. Right? That's my personal opinion on it. Um, and that's just one example of many of a variety of different of things that are found in the Amazon that these cultures use, right? Within not just for food subsistence or whatever else, but also for medicines with things of that nature as well. It's amazing all the stuff that's out there. Now as far as what you said, as far as it being a food desert is concerned, um, I don't really know a lot about that one as per se, other than to say that. There is if you cut a lot of that rainforest down and try to grow on it, it pretty much gives you nothing because you can't do
Yeah,
anything with it.
yeah.
I know that.
And for a long time, there was this idea. So there's the ideas in early anthropology, like you know, pre-anthropology in like the 18th into the 19th century, the early start of anthropology. There were a lot of ethnocentric ideas, and I'm using that neutrally, not negatively. But the bias there was this understanding that cultures went through this natural linear progression from band to tribe, chiefdom, state level. And that's not really true. We know that's not true now. It's more, a people can go from band to chiefdom. They can, they but at the time they really, anthropologists and people in general, they understood essentially a single track towards civilization, that it was a linear progression, but it's much more of a spectrum. It's much more of a of like not it doesn't have to be this traditional Eurasian and African method where, the Chinese civilization, the Harappan civilization, the Greek civilizations, they all follow this progression, but there's nothing about that progression that says that that's the only way that we can progress as different cultures. but for a long time they thought that it was. So they judged other cultures um, from this standard that they had to match this linear progression, that they had to have a cultural progression that matched with how these Chinese and European civilizations expanded. And then you had cultural relativity, which today has turned into, that's a whole nother conversation, but now it's biased in the other way. Now they love indigenous people, and they're biased against their own culture, and the pendulum just swung back the other way too much. So there's just a different bias, but they were wrong for a long time about that they they thought that there was one way to go, and civilizations couldn't differ from that. So they didn't have the capability to understand that there is a different a different track to get to civilization, a fork in the road where you can have something that is just as advanced, like, or more advanced in certain ways. For example, the Polynesian seafarers, or these Amazon, this Amazon civilization, a civilization, or something like the Aztecs or the Mayans that don't have metallurgy, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not advanced. It just means that they took a different track, and they had different ways based on their own available subsistence strategy and what they had available to them, to grow a civilization. And one specific example that I talk about quite a lot is, like, I actually had this discussion with the good old boys. Like, they didn't invent the wheel, right? Like, they didn't invent the wheel, so they're not advanced. But the Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, they don't need wheels. They didn't need wheels because they didn't have domesticated pack animals. So the wheels don't help. So you do have them inventing the wheel in things like toys, but you don't have them using it as in the same way that Europeans and Chinese used it, and East Asian people. And that doesn't mean they're not advanced. It's just differently advanced. You know what I mean? And
When we
then,
understand evolution,
yeah,
when we understand evolution, we let me rephrase that. When we talk about how cultures evolve, all right, we view it the exact same way we look at biology, how it evolves, all right. And one thing that we do know about how this works is to say that evolution, whether we're talking about cultural or biological, either way, does not make things better. It just doesn't. All right. We make this assumption that we're going a particular direction with evolution, that we're moving in the direction to become better, something more better in the future is the idea. All right. That's not true. All right. It's not unilinear. It's multilinear. All right. It's something that goes in any direction that it could possibly go in order to do what it's the most important thing for as far as evolution of the genes are concerned, which is to replicate itself and to keep your ass alive long enough to replicate itself. That's it. That's all it's interested in doing. All right, period. So this idea that like band, tribe, chief of state, that we're moving up in this stair step kind of way, that's incorrect. We just don't. That's not how it works. If it's evolution, if it's in the best interest of evolution or best interest of the genes, that you would be green soup, you would be green soup. All right, that's the reality of the
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Do
100%.
we have do we have examples of human societies taking steps backward in time?
Oh yes.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We do. I mean, in fact, Tasmania, which you had brought up, is which I don't know too much about, but is likely an example of that. And I think, and again, the evidence is being discovered right now, but the Yanomami people are likely a real example of that, of going back in time and based on a new environment, based on a new situation. Their subsistence strategy worked, their culture worked for a long time, and then you have this black swan event where conquistadors come over and they bring over pigs, and everybody dies of typhus and smallpox. Um, and then you have this new situation, and that means that you need to deal with that in a new way, and that might mean moving backwards. But again, I like the idea of backwards, like, yeah, they're reverting in a way back to an earlier method of living which they might have had in the past. But since it's not linear, um it's not necessarily, like, I understand what you're saying when you say backwards, but I want to be clear that it's like it's not backwards if the new method that they're adopting, even if it is associated with what might be called a more primitive society, it's still the best way for them to expand their culture at that point. So it's not backwards in the sense that they're becoming worse. They're responding to the new environment and they're evolving their culture in response to that in the best way possible.
So the best
Something
way to go ahead. Sorry.
something I remember from Sapiens was essentially making the argument that hunter gatherers were healthier than agricultural people for a long time, just in terms of, oh, you'll get bone density, their teeth, they had a more balanced diet.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Oh yeah, go ahead with that.
Yeah,
I
and
was going to
taller.
simply say that, yeah, that when we're talking about hunter gatherers and before the time frame of the agricultural revolution, we're talking about Chads that existed in the Paleolithic, in the Upper Paleolithic, compared to the agriculturists that came later. These are individuals that were in much better shape than we're now. If you get them past the age of 5 to live, in the tribe, if you get past the point you're not eaten by a saber-tooth tiger or whatever else, and you're able to survive, then yeah, you live very hardly a full life, right? But the issue is you start looking at why agriculture exists. Agriculture as a whole exists. It exists because that's the best way to get more people on the land. All right. Agricultural systems developed because it is a predator prey principle. When you look at hunter gatherers, and the aspect of how much predator versus prey dynamic there exists. All right, hunter gatherers have a limited carrying capacity to land. All right, but when you talk about agriculturists, on the other hand, you can have an unlimited amount of prey and a limited amount of unlimited amount of predators because the predators are creating their own prey. That's what agriculturists do, and that's why more people, the population increase, right, which is a benefit towards the genes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So even
Yeah,
though the
absolutely.
individual people are less healthy, the vast majority of the population is less healthy. They're able to on the same amount of land have a much higher population, so they're able to expand their culture regardless of their individual people being weaker in a lot of ways than the hunter gatherers who have much more nutrition.
If I'm getting too far off into the weeds with this theory, just let me know, guys, because I know this is not something we talk about a lot, I'm sure. But yeah, these are. You look at Cahokia is a great example of this. The individuals who were living in Cahokia and were had been eating corn now as a major part of their staple of their diets or whatever else. Or we're looking at Mississippian cultures. These are examples of how these cultures took a step backwards quite a bit in the aspect of how well their own personal health was deteriorating. All right, over having a larger population of 35 to 40,000 people or 50,000 people inside of a given city. I would make the argument that's true today, though. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. There was another indigenous people I wanted to ask you guys about. Are you guys familiar with the Sami of, I guess, Finland, Scandinavia?
Yeah. Yeah, I am. And I brought up some stuff on them. I don't know how much Cam knows about them, but this map here shows the Sami. If you're looking on the YouTube, the link is in the Twitter space. In the Sami, this is another good example. The Sami are in there are people that's distinct. I mean, when you get closer to where the Norse are living, in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, there is genetic overlap between them, and there was also probably movement between these people groups. Somebody would individual people would assimilate into Norse, or Norse people would assimilate into Sami culture, and they would adopt their subsistence strategy and marry in. But this is a difference of the environment there, whereas the Norse people, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes, they are practicing agriculture. It's a it's a warmer climate. They're raiding and they're practicing agriculture and they're trading, whereas the Sami are living farther north where agriculture can't really happen, and they're up there and they're herding reindeer. And these people existed, they coexisted in the same geographic area for so long because the agriculturalists in the Norse, they had no reason to conquer the Sami, even though they always could have, because there was nothing there that they wanted, because they would have to lose their subsistence strategy in order to use that land. So you have a delineation in population. You have the Sami in their land and the Norse in their land, and besides this small area where there's a little bit of gray area of doing agriculture, they're essentially not bothering each other for a long time.
Were the Scandinavian peoples were they're more Germanic lineage than the Samis?
Yes, I think so. Yes, they're more related to Germanic peoples. The Sami are, I think, more related. Don't quote me on this, but like Central Asians. They were
It,
different people.
yeah, with their they had a reindeer was their
Yep,
a big
still
thing they
is.
cultivated. Yeah.
Still is. And this is another example of, into the 19th century, you have 19th and 20th century across the world, you have people practicing these traditional subsistence strategies in the United States, Canada, Australia, and anywhere else, also like Russia, Soviet Union. They kind of are assimilating and destroying these indigenous cultures by removing their original subsistence strategies, by taking them off the land, taking them away from reindeer herding or from hunting and gathering, whatever specific thing those people are practicing, and trying to assimilate them into the greater population. And Scandinavia is no different. This is still going on there. There are Sami people that there are recent attempts from a lot of these countries, especially Finland, which isn't as woke as Norway and Sweden, but also Norway and Sweden do this as well, where they're attempting to assimilate and stop the traditional lifestyles of these people, as a method of modern um, of like modern colonialism. And yeah, the Sami are more related to Finns. They speak a Finno-Ugric language related to the Hungarian and Finnish languages.
Because Hungary was conquered by a steppe tribe.
Yep, a steppe tribe,
Right.
the
Yeah.
Magyar tribes, Magyar,
Magyars, yeah.
Magyars and other related tribes. The yeah the people in Hungary are genetically still Central European, but their culture, from the top down, a term in anthropology called hierarchical diffusion, from the top down of the culture, from the hierarchy, they adopted the culture of the conquerors, and those conquerors over time assimilated genetically into the population. But that steppe culture tied to the language continues to today.
Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but do we want to do Q&A at all? Because anthropology never stops, like, which is a good thing. It's so much fun. But I didn't know if you guys wanted to do Q&A or just keep going.
Uh, I think that would be great. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I don't
I
know
have
how
like
long you
I have
wanted to go.
17 questions.
So
Well, I have
I'm
17
happy to
questions, so we
go.
got to get started.
yeah,
I'm
let's
happy
do
to
it.
go another hour, but up to you guys how long you want to go.
Yeah, obviously Cam can head
Awesome.
out whenever he wants. Everybody, give Cam a follow. He does some great stuff, and check out my YouTube for that Cam discussing his research. It's absolutely incredible. But yeah, questions.
So I wanted to, you give the Bantu a lot of credit that I wouldn't give them organically. We can disagree on that, but I wanted to get your guys to read, both you and Cam, if he's still gonna stick around. Whenever people announce the end of anything, it's probably wrong. But I do feel like we've reached this end of traditional anthropology in the sense that we've experienced about 100 years now of cultures societies, religions, ideologies, the whole gamut that would not survive at a global level. They don't have the tools, they don't have the capacity. But because they were picked up and favored by the ruling regime of the globally dominant culture, they're now everywhere. So the Bantu, if we want to believe that they would have spread over Africa on their own, that's fine. But they never would have made it to the New World. They absolutely would not
Oh,
be in the Northern Hemisphere. But now they are. And there's a good chance if things continue, they are in the running to dominate the continent. It would take a long time and be very bloody. So I was just wondering if you comment on that idea that maybe anthropology, that there's kind of a neo-anthropology we have to start considering, where it's not just about native talents and actual capacities. There's also preferential treatment by technology or groups. And a crazy situation like, imagine AI decided that the Yanomamo are the best people on the planet and then worked to achieve that. Or you could look at Sentinel Island in terms of keeping a culture around that would not last 5 minutes without being protected. So that was the nature of the question, if that makes sense.
yeah. So, I mean, the Bantu did expand over most of the area of sub-Saharan Africa, and that's not like that's I don't I would not say that they would have ever expanded into the New World or even into North Africa. I don't. There's that the opposite has happened. It's not real. But the Bantu people genetically, I didn't make this clear. They're obviously American blacks. I should say in an anthropological term, African Americans, and African Americans refers not necessarily to just anyone of African descent in anthropology, but to specifically the descendants of freed American slaves. They are Bantu genetically, but they don't carry this Bantu culture. They don't have that. They didn't bring that over. Obviously, they were taken, they were taken against their will by African kingdoms, sold to Europeans, brought over here. And then a new, it's called a syncretism, when multiple different cultures, and these are multiple different Bantu cultures, as well as mixing in with European cultures, they meet and they create a new culture. So that syncretism happens. So no, it's not the Bantu expansion is not like the black people in North America is not an expansion of the Bantu expansion. That culture, that basket of goods is gone. It's been gone for forever. It was gone the second they got on the boats. And so I would say that anthropology and any field does it does evolve over time. And that being said, I don't think that it requires a rethinking of the entire field itself. But preferential treatment of specific groups is something that we can find at any point for many different reasons in human cultures. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing in this case, but it's not something that requires the field to be reworked itself. Especially when you see like, you know, the black people, and again, I'm not saying African American here because a lot of them are not African American, like Barack Obama, who is not an African American. He is half black, but he's half African, not African American. Um, what you see is a lot of these. It's a meme that people of color, these different peoples of color, which is just a euphemism for non-white, um, those people, non-white people, all the ones that are in government are the most privileged of these non-white people. They're like, if you look at, and they're most of the time they're married to white people. They're married to white people, Jewish people. Um, and that gives them a proximity to the traditional forms of power, as well as having the benefit of being a privileged class based on their race. And there isn't a lot of like nuance that's given in this point. No one cares that, you know, what's her name, the vice president. No one cares that Kamala Harris is descended from a slave owner. It doesn't get brought up, but it's true that she's descended from a Jamaican slave owner. And her family is from the upper class in Jamaica. And again, not African American. Does that answer your question? I got kind of.
In a way, it does. I get what you're saying too, and I just want to double down on it too. That the ruling class of blacks in America is hilariously octoroon at most, but
Yeah.
most of the time they're Mustafinos, and it's this really funny situation of a elephant in the room. That there was a hilarious YouTube black who Tony Montoya.
Hmm.
I don't know. He had a show. It was insufferable. But it was funny if you watch it in clips. But he made a comment that real black people never have power in America.
Right. Right.
Talking, and it was a simpleton's approach. But yeah, that pure skin color perspective, it's always high yellows that seem to get the favor of the
Yeah.
regime. And
It.
I do want to redirect though, kind of double down that playing favorites is an interesting thing when I think of the Janissaries, when I think of there's other groups of people that have been kind of co-opted into a different culture and they're seen as lesser. But as time stretches out, the particulars kind of fade away. And with the reintroduction of Bantu ideology in its completely twisted and incorrect form, but with this celebration of blackness, if we stretch the timeline out a few hundred years, it might be very hard to delineate between real Bantu and like made up Bantu when you're looking back, if all you have to work with is genetics, or if
Yeah.
all you have to work with is like fragments. So you're absolutely right. I'm not saying like, well, we need to redo anthropology, but I do think a lot of anthropology is looking at a time where things happen a lot more naturally, and we're in a period now where things are artificial. And I believe John Carter put on his Substack last week talking about how airplanes change the game for absolutely everything because you can build houses at a certain speed, but you can fly airplanes at a different speed. So human transfer has become this incredible wild card
Yeah.
for demographics and for culture. So yeah, it wasn't a question to be answered. It was just more like a line of thought, but
Yeah. Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. It was a good
Can,
line of
can I
thought.
can I claim it on that?
Yeah.
I'm only going to say that human beings are animals too, and you can't separate human beings from the natural environment. It's genetics plus environment equals the phenotype or the behavior of the organism. I think that when we're talking about an anthropology that needs to be revamped or redone, I'd say from the time of Franz Boas, where he was busy trying to save all the tribes that existed out there and sending his people out to catalog everything that existed. So try to like save the languages and save we have changed quite a bit already. We've moved from a viewpoint that was Marxist in our approach as far as seeing things from a top down way of looking at society to more an evolutionary one now. This like now changed to how we view anthropology as a whole, and we see it now from the perspective of okay, from the gene centered view of the world around us. All right, that's not to say that that one group is better. I'm not trying to bring in cultural relativity or anything like that. Not trying to say that, or trying to say negative or whatever else, or positive one way or another. But I am going to say that we have to look at cultures for the most part in how not just the perspective of what is going on with how well we communicate. We have to look at it as a part of the landscape itself. All right, how well we evolve within the given environment that we're in. And that environment could be completely niche. That environment could be 100% a niche environment, one that we're completely creating on its own. And we have to view it from that perspective as our natural environment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone else would like to come up and ask our gentlemen any questions, feel free to request to speak. I'll be happy to add you.
Yeah. In the
But
meantime, I'd like to say that I think that like you said, no real black ever holds power. And I think that's true because like the diversity that we have in the leadership of the country is very, very skin deep. Someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is considered a person of color, even though she's a conquistador who has a Jewish boyfriend, whatever. She is a person of color, but they're never going to take somebody off of like Section 8 housing in like in the middle of Baltimore. They're not going to rise to power. the black people, and I mean African Americans and later Caribbean and African immigrants, they're the ones that end up getting power are the ones that assimilate into the broader white culture, which has reformed into this multiracial ruling class. And it is a requirement to give up, however negative we might think that culture is of, like, inner city Baltimore, that black culture. However negative we think about that, it's true that they have to give that up in order to exist in, like, polite white and now multiracial upper class society.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any other types of peoples you want to talk about tonight, Sam?
You sent me the notes. We talked about them all. We talked about the Yanomami. We talked about the New Guineans briefly, the Khoisan, the Sami. No, no, not really. You had brought up the Tasmanians, but I definitely do not know a lot about them. I wouldn't be able to say much.
Yeah, I think we can briefly touch on that. Is there's been a couple incidents throughout human history where more advanced societies have found not just, like we talked about, the subjectivity of technology and culture and all of that, but there's also just people who are out of place in time, it seems, such as the Tasmanians, who they lost the ability to use fire to cook their food, which is fairly, I mean, I don't know how long uh, hominids have been using fire to cook, but it has to be probably hundreds of thousands of years. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, that's very strange to me. Almost to the point that I don't really believe it. I'd have to study it more. Sometimes, like, if we're dealing with, like, if we're dealing with um sparse information, if we're dealing with maybe like one anthropologist's opinion studying in people, I'm sure there's more than that in Tasmania. There can be a lot of bias that's in any direction that's built in. That doesn't sound plausible to me. I don't know.
The
I have an
primary.
advisor. Go ahead.
Oh, go
I had
ahead.
an advisor. I had an advisor who did a study on Tasmania and did a class on it. And basically, the toolkit just got reduced. What it boiled down to, they got separated from the mainland. Something like, what was it? I think it was like 20,000 years ago, something like that, 20, 30,000 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how far back it goes, but they got separated roughly around that time frame, and their toolkit that they had from the mainland part of Australia just reduced because of it. And
Yeah.
over a period of few generations, they just lost that knowledge. And I would make the argument we see that to some extent going on today. With as technology would increase, we lose knowledge on aspects of things we used to do in the past. All
Mm,
right.
yeah.
Now, as far as the fire, I've heard a variety of arguments on this one. I'm not gonna say in definitive one or another, but I would question the aspect of that. I would question the fact they're not having fire. We've had the capability for creating fire for going on well over, I think, was it 50,000 years now.
Look,
So
can I
yeah.
jump in here real quick? The
Yeah.
the sourcing is in the link. If you look into the comments of this space, I put the Twitter thread that I got it from. They
Yeah.
didn't lose fire. They lost the ability to make it. And so they are a culture that had to kindle the fire constantly. So they couldn't start new fires. They could only extend off the
Oh,
fires,
interesting.
which has
Yeah.
there's an immense amount of technology for this. And just for all you city folk out there, if you find moss, get it wet, put it in a container, you can put embers on top of it. It'll last for a very long
Yeah.
time. And then you rekindle it, which is itself a technology. But they apparently, and again, it's a single source. I mean, I'm no anthropologist, but that what they lost was the ability to kindle fire from no fire. But they kept fire. Another thing too that they talked about is that they refused to eat fish. They would eat shellfish and they would eat birds, but they would not eat fish. They found it utterly disgusting, which is interesting for an island people. And in fact, I've never ever heard of an island people that didn't eat fish. But there's one other point with them that was fascinating, and they are gone now. The Tasmanian Aboriginals have been obliterated. but apparently they traded away all their hoes for dogs. When the colonists brought dogs and they saw how good dogs were at hunting, they traded away the one thing of value they had, which was unmarried females, which was also apparently the source of most violence and murder and death on their island, was fighting over women.
which is
So
very
it's
common.
really, yeah, that is, and the murder rate too. That I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about how Chadley, the hunter gatherers are. It's true, but they're also really, really bad at cooperation. A lot of because
Yeah.
they're all alpha chads that can't work together. And so the grain cuck may not be as strong or good looking, but because he can coordinate, he's got this significant advantage over the lone wolf. But the Tasmanian one is a fascinating case just because they really it's not like they had a choice with the level of colonizers technology, but they apparently hastened their own disappearance by trading away their virginal women so that they could get hunting dogs, which is
And
just hilarious when you look at modern American culture.
this is an example of, like, when people have a value system that's based on a particular situation, and then that situation drastically changes, you see a lot of unforeseen consequences. And an example of this, there are many different situations where warfare in hunter-gatherer and horticulturalist societies is based around their weapons, which are not as deadly as early modern guns and pikes and things like that. So when you have a culture that has violence that's practiced in a certain way, and then introduced is a method that is far more deadly, but they don't have time to reform their society to create a new culture surrounding how they practice warfare and violence, you can see violence and violent deaths really, really take off, almost to a feedback loop level. And when you have something like women being the source of value, and then you have this new thing come in, this new technology and these hunting dogs that is so very valuable, it can create a massive, massive issue for that society, as they have value based on an old situation, and then that situation then changes.
I'm going to drag this back to Napoleon Chagnon again, if you guys don't mind,
Yeah,
because when you think about it
I already
from,
know what you're gonna say. I love it.
yeah, I mean, let's get, you had people within that society, Yamamoto, who you had people within that society. The reason why they're able to breed as well, or have as many children as they could, or successful with breeding, is because they were willing to kill, and that was the entire argument that Shagnon made in his work. All right, that those who were willing to and have killed were the ones who ended up being able to like have more wives and have more children,
Yeah,
whereas
and he
it boils right
demonstrated
back
this
to
in data. By the way, there's data
exactly.
on this
And
because
this is
yeah,
why Marshall Salomons, is that pronounced his name correctly? I may be mistaking it, but why they went after him, and why they went after him in the all the various different articles they wrote on him and everything else. This is the argument that is being fostered. The problem that we run into over and over and over again with anthropology, all right, in the Marxist viewpoint, is that there's that tabula rasa, the blank slate, that view that societies way in the past, the hunter gatherers, whatever else, way in the past, were all matrilocal, matrilineal, matriarchal societies that were not fighting each other. They lived in this pristine harmony with the world around them. All right, this is the same stuff. The coming of age of Samoa. You did a video on that, right?
I did. Yeah, Coming of Age of
Yeah.
Samoa, Margaret Mead, complete BS.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This is the prevailing view you had in anthropology for a very long time, until the evolutionary argument started taking a hold back into anthropology again. And now it's swinging back the other way. All right, it's swinging slowly, but it's still swinging back the other way. All right, and there lies that issue, that why they attacked Napoleon Chagnon, why they attacked a lot of individuals over the years who've done socio-bio, have done evolutionary theory, evolutionary psychology, stuff like that over time. They do not like this because it breaks their view on how they see the world, how they see cultures develop and evolve on their own, right? And in their mind, their view is it's very linear. It's single linear, unilinear kind of thinking that is based on the aspect that patriarchy comes in, and they're what screws everything up. That's their view. All right, and that was their argument towards kids, and it's hilarious when you think about it. That's an argument that went up against Shagnon because supposedly he was trading axes and tools within that culture. It's because he was bringing that technology in. He's bringing his viewpoints of how society works to them. That's why they were violent, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is what, like, this type of research, they can't do it because the people that do it get attacked, they get their careers destroyed. And someone like Napoleon Chagnon, who was already a celebrated anthropologist, he was able to survive this. But the people that want to study this stuff, they just don't get funding, and the research doesn't get done. And then people like Flint Drivel's dumbass come in and they're like, oh, well, the research doesn't exist. We have to work with what we have. It's like, yeah, well, why don't we have that research? You fucking nerd.
I mean, I could go on and on and on about this. I know we have a limited amount of time, but the reality is, yeah, when we look at hell, the research I'm doing right now that I'm playing around with as far as the Venus figurines are concerned, I'm running headlong into individuals who do not like what I have to say on Venus figurines because their viewpoint is there's a matrilineal, matriarchal society that lived in the deep past 30,000 years ago, and the gods were women, and it was all a mother goddess cult, which brought about the neo-paganism ideas of like the last last 20, 30 years, well, closer to 50, 60 years now. And I interpret it differently. They don't like that. All right. There lies that kind of issue. These ideas, these notions, these Margaret Mead ideas towards how culture has evolved over years is still very prevalent in certain aspects and certain departments across the United States and Europe. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah. And that's why the work that we do is so important, because we're up against, we're up against just the worst. Like we're up against the biggest money, grant funding, and like cultural capital. So it's
what does Flint Dribble? Why does that benefit him of siding the establishment? It's a little bit of a redundant question, but
well,
do you mind
he's
explaining
part
that
of
to
it.
the audience?
Yeah. So I mean, Flint Dibble is part of the Society for American Anthropologists, and these guys, the people at the top, and there are lots of examples of this. How I have a video of this on my channel. Cam touched on it. The Margaret Mead, who was one of these top level mainstream anthropologists, and what's his name, Freeman, Australian anthropologist. He was heavily attacked for going against the mainstream narrative. They're they get they basically get clout, and they get attention from other people. It's a massive patronage network based on funding and based on citations on papers. So it helps their career to knock down others. That's the incentive structure in academia. And it's another hierarchical diffusion situation from the top down, where the money and the cultural capital that certain people receive from many different sources, they're able to use that to further their own careers. And they're able to attack these ideas that go against them and help themselves by attacking others. I don't know if I explained that well.
No,
I think you did.
Sense.
How I explain this to students is say this, right? That how science works is, at least in anthropology is concerned, everyone's building their own sandcastles. Everyone's building literally up their own sandcastles the best they possibly can to create it as durable as they can. That's only half the job. The other half of your job is run around on the same beach and knock down everybody else's, all right, as hard and fast as you can. Okay. And when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, it's a kind of an evolutionary approach when you think about it, that, the best hypothesis end up staying because you have all these people attacking every hypothesis. But the problem is that it's not done fairly by a stretch of the imagination. It's done in such a way where you have groups of people who will band together at different universities, or band together over money, or band together over like a religious belief, or band together or whatever else, right? And use their power, clout, and influence to attack someone else, all right, and knock their stuff down. And this is exactly what happened to. This is going back to Napoleon Shagnon. This is exactly what happened to him, because the entire University of Michigan, went after him. All right, the
University of
entire
Michigan
department.
having one of the most prominent anthropology departments in the country. Freeman
Yes,
was
literally.
Australian, which is why he was able to do what he did, but it still mattered.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to him. All right, they just came at him full force and got him nearly kicked out of every major group he was with. All right, National Academy of Sciences eventually made him a member, but because they made him a member, Marshall Salins, the guy who was the main person who attacked him, he left the National Academy of Sciences and threw 9 kinds of shits fits about it too. I mean, it was pretty horrible.
Who was an explicit Marxist.
Yes, absolutely.
Marxists everywhere.
Yeah, especially in
Yeah,
anthropology. Marxism is baked into anthropology at this point.
Speaking of Marxists, if you want to mog Marxists, we have a space deal tonight, and that is going to be our Juneteenth special. We have $5 offs, Cyber Pepe trucker hats on sale now. That sale ends at midnight, so you only have an hour and a half to go on,
Fantastic.
and it applies at checkout. Believe it or not. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, I'm a humanities guy, so you're just gonna have to bear with this. But it's kind of fascinating to me. The problem you've explained with anthropology is mirrored between pastoralism versus the farmer, the grain cuck versus the hunter-gatherer dad, in that you have these lone wolf anthropologists who are smarter and better with stronger theories, but these weak guys like Wayne Gribble or whatever the hell his name is, they have figured out that if they team up and they control the water hole, then they don't have to have good theories. They don't have to do good research. They've just got to outlast you guys while you're starving out in bush, because
Right.
they get all the funding, metaphorically speaking. And for anybody that's interested in this and you want to see how the sausage is made, you need to go to the conferences. Conferences are where the modern institutions, like where they facilitate everything, where they meet up, it's where they do the handshake, the backroom deals, and they do it pretty much out in the open too, because you can go to walk the vendor floor and you're going to see who's got the money. And then if you look at the keynote speaker list, you're going to see who's in charge. And then if you look at the workshops, that's going to be the people that are allowed to share their ideas. And you'll get a really good breakdown of like who is what and where it's going.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents. But it just kind of struck me how funny it is that you guys are you're the hunter gatherers of anthropology, and these assholes are the guys with the farms, but they're weak.
Yeah.
So start smashing heads, I guess.
There's there is a comparison here to a concept known as big men. And if you take an undergrad anthropology course, you will probably watch this old documentary called Onga's Big Mocha from the 70s. And Onga is this big man in Papua New Guinea. And a big man in a lot of these hunter-gatherer pastoralist societies, there is leadership through consensus and there's leadership through redistribution. These are not market-based economies. These are people that redistribute their wealth, and what they value, is not money or currency. They don't have that. It's status. And so what you have in Onga's Big Mocha is you have this big man, Onga, who has other lesser big men under him. And these lesser big men, they grow their own credibility and their own status through being attached to Onga. And they're going to throw mochas, which are parties, in his honor. And they're going to redistribute wealth in the form of pigs to not only other people, but also to Onga himself. And then Onga has multiple wives that do the farming for him. You can't make it up. That do the farming for him, that have these pigs. And eventually, Onga throws the biggest party, the biggest mocha that anyone's ever seen, and that facilitates his and solidifies his status as the biggest big man in this general area. And I think that
Potlatch.
yeah, potlatches in the Pacific Northwest. It's where the term potluck comes from. This is a thing. There are parallels to this in a lot of different places. But in Papua New Guinea, Onga does this. He throws this big party. He gets a lot of status from this. But these lesser big men, they give him things, and in return, they get the status of being attached to him. It's like feudalism, in another way, like these lesser knights and counts to kings and dukes and stuff like that. Um, so you have something similar in academia, where if you go under Flint Drivel, Flint Fibble, Flint whatever is this loser, you'll see under his comments not only people like me arguing with him until we get blocked, which he blocks anyone that criticizes him, but you'll also see a lot of these lesser anthropologists agreeing with what Flint is saying. And they do this, they work on each other's papers, they get citations, and they grow the prestige of the people above them. And in return, they get some of that back. And hopefully, eventually, they can climb to the top and they can, and they can be the ones that are shitting on everyone else. And over time, that's what happens. And if you go beyond that and you try to do your own thing, it's very difficult to do that on your own. You have to work much harder, and it's a lot harder to actually get success. Does that make sense?
The most important political relationship is between patron and client.
Yes. Yes.
It is too, and there's so many little details you can add. Like there's nuance and refinement to like the feudal system and then to the system that we're in. But it really does. It comes down to that patron-client relationship, and so much of navigating social circumstances is being able to identify who's the patron and who's the client. But I have noticed that you can't point it out. Like when it's a bunch of savages in the backwoods who've never seen a camera, they don't mind being dissected. But if you're at a party and you point out patron-client relationships, you're 50-50 shot. You might become ostracized just for pointing out the thing that's happening. Because people like to pretend, we've moved past, big man politics. Fascinating.
Yeah. We haven't. We have not at all. We are still animals. There hasn't been enough
Like
time for evolution.
Tom would smash a rock over someone's head if I told him to, because he's my friend. Aren't you, Tom?
100%. He's
Yeah.
a big man.
And it's not like I'm immune to this, like as a lesser podcaster, I am in the orbit of people like the good old boys, right? Like I'm a lesser podcaster to their greater podcast, and I raise their prestige by going on their show and talking to them, and they raise their own prestige and they raise my prestige by having me on. It's everywhere. And in the context of anthropology, I'm here backing up somebody like Jimmy Corsetti, who is another, like, he's a big name in alternative anthropology, and I'm attached to him, supporting him, and he in turn legitimizes me as I'm helping him out.
Yeah,
It's actually, it is. It's a good system unless people put their thumb on the scales. Sorry, go ahead, man.
In the Marxist analysis, they have a lot of problems with this because they have to bring everything in Marxism to oppressor oppressed, when what you described is just a mutually beneficial situation. It's just forming essentially teamwork in a little bit more convoluted sense, I guess.
Yeah, it's like in the Marxist worldview, the materialist worldview, it's somebody doesn't have as much as someone else. They don't stop to think that, the people that are lesser in those situations are still better off than they would be otherwise. There's a lot I could say about that, but yeah.
In the Marxist viewpoint is not we're teaming up for mutual benefit. All right. The Marxist viewpoint is we're teaming up against the big bad man. If that makes any sense. We're teaming up against. Go ahead.
Sorry, I got a request to speak. Hey, Smeagol fan, I'll let you speak just to let everybody know who requests. You got to just be respectful towards Sam because he's recording for YouTube and everything. So just
no, Smeagol's my friend. He knows.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay,
yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I didn't know.
No, that's okay. But thank you. Yeah, Smeagol, don't keep the J talk to a minimum.
Hello?
Go ahead,
Can
bro.
you hear me?
Hey, we hear you
Hey.
now.
All right, thanks. Hey, I didn't know if you guys covered this, but Harold Dibbles or Flint Dibbles' whole
Yeah.
family, his dad and his grandfather Harold, you know that they're CIA connected, correct?
Yeah, so Smeagol was talking to me about this a little bit. There is some circumstantial evidence that points to this. His dad
Well,
is
it's not
Harold.
circumstantial. I got the documents, dude. I
Oh,
got them.
okay.
I'm
Yeah, Jared.
I'm fascinated to
Link
hear.
them in the comments.
Smeagol,
I'll link it in the comments.
Smeagol, hold on one second. I just want to say this too, though, that I don't doubt it at all, but like you guys have to understand that they are everywhere in academia. Like
Yeah.
there is not a university in this country that does not have at least 3 or 4 adjuncts who get direct payroll, and then that's not even counting all the contractors. So
No,
there
but
is
he
a
was like a
delineation.
founder.
Yeah,
His
no, that's what I'm
grandfather was
getting
like a
at.
founder
Is
of the CIA.
Oh my
That's
God.
what I'm getting at because I did a little dive on him. He seems legacy, like he's not just on the payroll. But
Holy
I didn't
crap.
know. I'm glad you're reinforcing what I read
Yeah,
because I didn't
he
know if
was
it was
with
crazy or
Jerry
not.
Kuiper or Cooper, who was OSS in World War II. That was the right Harold Dibble Sr.
He's
was
like
the
an
right hand
OG.
man. Yeah, he's an OG. He was there in 1954 at what is now the Florida Institute of Technology. There's pictures of Harold Dibble and Kuiper, and they're working on at RCA analysis systems, which ended up becoming the Florida Institute of Technology. They were putting all these missile systems together down in Florida, and this is whenever because Harold Dibble Jr. was born in 1951.
That's
So
Flint's
while he's
dad,
down in
by the
Florida,
way.
he's doing all this work.
Okay. Holy
Yep.
crap.
You
So
guys
it
do
is
realize. Go ahead.
there.
I was going to say, you guys do realize that anthropology is essentially intel work, right?
That's where I was going
Makes
to go with it.
sense.
Is that
Yeah.
that's where it all came from.
Well, and
Because
here's the
you
crazy
got to think
thing.
of who's going to these remote locations, who has the capacity and the logistics. It's kind of hand in glove.
So Flint Dibble's dad, Harold Jr., he was like into robotics. He had a missile engineering degree. He did missile testing systems as well, and he also did his own coding. So he came up with the first robotics to mimic Neanderthals in archaeology. That was like his whole thing. And so he was doing this in the 1990s. So this guy already had access to like DARPA systems that were underground because of his dad working essentially for what was like pre-DARPA. Like
Yeah, it's a little bit
this
of an
is so
advantage,
insane.
isn't it? A little bit of an advantage.
Dude. Okay.
So then that begs the question, though: is the anthropology thing a cover, or is he serious about it? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It's all covers, dude. Like they get to go to foreign countries and they infiltrate them. Duh.
Well, just to throw this in there, and this does tie into anthropology, and this is a personal pet peeve of mine, and I am a Baptist, but you guys would be blown away by how many missionaries are also on the CIA payroll for exactly the same reason, because you've got these people in country who don't get a second look, and people just kind of the natives just kind of ignore them. So you can funnel money, you can build safe houses, you've got logistics, transport, you've got a perfect cover for moving
I
across
wouldn't be
borders.
surprised at all because my aunt was the head of the General Baptist Missions in for where I come from. So yeah, she was a missionary as well. And I don't know. I guarantee you that illegitimate scholar could probably speak to this as well. When I came out of the Marine Corps and I eventually ended up in anthropology, one of the first words out of an advisor's mouth is, "Are you planning on taking this and going to do intel work out of this?" One of the first questions they asked me.
Yeah, because they get a lot of those guys from Intel. They'll get to do an end run around undergrad, and they'll just drop them into a master's or a graduate program. Um, and
Yep.
you'll be incredibly fit, tan guys who have, nebulous backstories of where they did their undergrad, do like 2 semesters in anthropology, and then they're gone.
Dude, and
Yeah, that's very much a pipeline.
I was earlier, Spiegel was starting to talk about, I guess he has more evidence, but I was looking at the circumstantial evidence that he showed me a few hours ago. And in the little digging that I did, I found that Harold Dibble Jr., Flint's dad, his advisor was a Marine Corps veteran, his PhD advisor.
Yeah, and he's in CIA documents too. Like there's like little traces of him in CIA pages and stuff. Like and I just linked the page in the comments because I forget how to do the jumbotron. But basically, like they show pictures, they have the whole history, and that's in his Wikipedia too for Harold Dibble Jr. about his dad being one of the founding members for the Florida Institute of Technology, which was RCA analysis. It's well documented with him and Jerry Cooper, or whatever, the guy from that was OSS, born in Kentucky. He lived almost like he lived for like 80 or 90 years. So like this is all it's all connected, and we don't like to put this stuff out there, but then we find the real evidence that links all these people together, and it's not really a theory.
Oh my
It's just a
God.
conspiracy.
I wouldn't worry about it, man. Just keep watching the NFL. It'll be okay. But yeah, that's the thing about a lot of this stuff. Like Egypt is very sensitive about its archaeology, right? Because of the history of colonialism, the history of the military, foreign military in Egypt and stuff. So it's very understandable why a lot of these nations with amazing wonders of the ancient world that are sensitive about Europeans and others being there.
Yeah, it really muddies the water too in terms of talking about like Egyptologists versus the people that think the pyramids are spaceships, and then you have to wonder like, is there any veracity to these crazy technology claims, or is it are they just teasing at the threads of a massive CIA ongoing operation, and they're like, it's aliens, and it's like, no, it's Langley. Like Langley, it's doing stuff, and you guys think it's aliens. I'm not saying that's what it is. I just think it's kind of a funny.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the purpose of intelligence agencies to muddle the water with things in a lot of cases, right?
Um.
So,
Yeah. Are we gonna keep going on this for a while?
um, I does anybody else want to ask Sam or anyone else a question? Haven't got too many Q&A requests, but anybody is free to come up and ask a question.
I'm just gonna go to the
And I
bathroom.
wasn't
I'll be
joking. I
right
do
back.
have like a list of 17, but I don't have to
Go
ask
ahead.
them all.
Thanks for letting me up. I'll switch down to listening.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks a
you,
lot,
guys.
Smeagol. I'm gonna pass this on to the relevant people. I'm not gonna touch this myself, but I will pass it along to people who can do something with it.
I put it up on the jumbotron for everybody, so check it out.
Well, I did want to ask a question about human speciation, and if you feel like there's any seriousness that should be looked at from the anthropological position. And to clarify what I'm saying there, it's most often portrayed as like the meme is hobbits were real. Whether you're talking about the Denisovans or I always say that wrong, Denisovans or anything like that. Can you comment? Can either of you guys or anyone comment on whether that seems legitimate? Like we know there were other proto-human species, but the idea of concurrent Homo like coexisting on the planet and then either being absorbed or pushed out.
I know that some of the tribes we've talked about today definitely have Denisovan DNA in their lineage. So there's definitely kind of a checkerboard of DNA with different human populations. Isn't it Europeans are the only ones with Neanderthal DNA in general?
I thought it was sub-Saharan Africans are the only ones without,
Oh, okay.
but I might be
Yeah,
wrong on that.
sub-Saharan Africans are the one without. Mitochondrial Eve dates back to, I think, roughly 150,000 years. So, I mean, we know that anatomically modern humans basically came about 300,000 years ago, but all the humans that exist on the planet today trace our lineage back only for as far back as 150,000 years. So, yeah, there have been, you can't really claim speciation between what exists today, if that makes any sense. All right, you can't really claim that. But what you can claim is that, yeah, Neanderthals were at one time a subspecies of Homo sapiens Neanderthalis versus Homo sapiens sapiens. That's true. And we have some DNA out of Europe in certain groups of Europe that it's obvious they were mating. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to. I think Sam's away from the mic for a second, but yeah, there's been fossils that have been discovered of. I don't even think they're Denisovians. I think they're some kind of. They're referred to as like Hobbit peoples, but it it sucks because a lot of these samples that are found are just like a little tiny bone, and they were
I
able
think
to
you're talking
get
about.
DNA.
I think we're talking about Florian tennis or
I
Florian
think so.
tennis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that one's yeah, out of Asia. So I mean, it's well on the other side of the on the Asian continent. So yeah, I mean, they existed obviously, and they were a different. They were a Homo florientinus. They were not a subspecies like Neanderthal was, I believe. Now, someone may have corrected me on that, but I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure that's true. And they were extant with human beings. They did exist at the same time, but not for very long. That's all I remember out of like undergrad from God knows how long ago. That one.
Yeah. Was I think they might have found the main fossil source in Taiwan, from understand, or somewhere in that region.
Yeah, somewhere in that region. Yeah, that's correct. Somewhere in that general area.
Can you comment on the seriousness with which we should take Robert Saper? And I'm not saying that to insult. I love his content. It's fascinating, but I don't know how to properly contextualize a lot of what he says because sometimes it's like it resonates. He has a video on cargo cults that is absolutely amazing and it illustrates exactly what a cargo cult is. But then he'll do other videos and it's like, I don't know how to take
I don't
this.
know the guy.
And he Okay, and I didn't know if he was how widely known he is, but he's also an anthropologist. He's got fascinating content. If anything, it's just fun to listen to. But he takes himself very seriously. So I just love to get an insider opinion on Saper and see if it's like worth contending with seriously or if it's just kind of popcorn entertainment.
I'd have to take a look at him. I don't know anything about the guy.
Yeah, it might be worth it. He definitely he touches on some out there stuff, but he also touches on some very grounded stuff too. And he's one of those. He's a warrior against the out of Africa thesis, and he's been fighting that battle pretty hard over the last year with hilarious results on.
He's multi-regional hypothesis.
Yeah, he basically he was one of the people that for a long time was saying that out of Africa just wasn't substantiated. That it wasn't that humans arose like what we call human don't just come from one source, which I think is pretty clear now that it's not a single source. Obviously contending with creationism, which I'm not discounting whatsoever. But I don't want to articulate his argument for him. He's definitely got a lot on it.
And the problem with the multi-regional hypothesis is that we can run the DNA backward, and we can see where mitochondrial Eve came from. The issue that I have with out of Africa theory is that it's obvious that we're also interbreeding with other extinct breeding populations once we get out of Africa too. So I mean, you had several different groups that came out in a variety of different exoduses from out of Africa that settled the whole world, and they evolved on their own in their own ways, right? And then eventually, when Homo sapiens leaves, all right, you have them interbreeding with all those groups too as well. That doesn't mean out of Africa is incorrect. It just simply means that there's more to it than just Africa, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I've heard a lot. Yeah, there has been a lot of dispute amongst the out of Africa stuff that I've heard. I don't know how much I buy that. It's kind of there could be a maliciousness of it in terms of people trying to use that as justification for whatever politics right now, but it is very clear that human populations in Africa are quite ancient and humanoids. So,
Well, we have Denisovians, we have Neanderthals, we have a variety of different groups that more likely we were encountering when we went out and got away from Africa. That's what I'm saying. and these groups had left Africa hundreds of thousands of years earlier and had started moving away around, all of Asia and wherever else in between. So yeah, we interacted with these individuals, and they had an effect on the gene pool because where they were at, they went through gene flow and the genetic drift and whatever else too. So I mean, all those things took place and helped create Homo sapiens to be who we are today. Um, but one thing that is absolutely true is that we can trace back that one single heritage of set of genes going back to monocolonal Eve and out of Africa. We can pretty much narrow it down to where actually in Africa it came from, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Hey Sam, are you back yet?
Uh, yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
wild.
was there anything else you wanted to cover tonight? I don't think I have anybody else that wants to come up to speak. So
No, I think we covered it. This is that was wild at the end there. Holy crap.
yeah,
I kind of liked it.
Yeah, no, I mean I loved it. I love this stuff. The general anthropology stuff and then the little surprise we had at the end. But yeah, good talk guys. Thanks so much for coming up here and supporting Cam. It's great to have I'm not supremely confident on all these topics, so it's nice to have you in here for your legitimized. You're the legitimate scholar in this case, and I'm
PhD.
the illegitimate. Yeah.
Well, I'm not a PhD yet, but and I don't know how legitimate I am, but I do know that one of these days I'll finish this all up, hopefully this year, and get it all finished up and get my doctoral and walk away. But these topics obviously I find interesting, and but what got me is I've never talked on this before. I've never done this on Twitter before like this. It's kind of interesting. So this is new to me.
Yeah, well, you are legitimate to me. And the thing about archaeology PhDs is that they generally take a lot longer than other PhD programs. If people don't know, just a little tidbit, they can be very difficult.
Well, I'm going to take off, guys. I do appreciate y'all having me, and everyone, I appreciate you listening. So y'all have a great night, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, Cam.
And everyone, don't forget to check out wbsapparel.com. We have the $5 off Cyber Pepe hats tonight, and that discount applies at checkout. Don't forget, only an hour left on the sale. So if you want to grab one, get it soon. Thank you so much, guys. Sam, thank you for coming on. This was a great time. Be happy to do it again with you sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. And don't forget to bring a towel. Sorry, what you said just reminded me of that. Yeah, buy stuff from WBS Apparel.
As always, stay based and don't forget, we're all going to make it.